All right, hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here with my brother, and we're going to review what Tarantino's third movie of the decade. Yeah, it feels like these Tarantino movies are coming out quicker than you're usually used to. But Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's been out since the summertime. It finally came out on home video, DVD, Blu-ray. So what do you think of it, looking back on it?
Well, first off, we're Tarantino fans. I love Tarantino. One thing that's great about when a Tarantino movie comes out is I always end up going to the movies a little bit more often. He always gets me excited to go back to the movies. And with this movie, I had a really good time with it. I had kind of a unique experience with it. I actually saw it twice at the New Beverly Cinema in Los Angeles, which is a really cool, stripped down. If you go there, if you've never been there before, it's like going to the movies in the early 90s, that's regular old school kind of cinema seating. Popcorn is only like $3, soda's only $2, it's not like out-gouging prices. And they also have posters, from the movie, and they also talk about the movie beforehand. So yeah, if you ever get a chance to go to the New Beverly Cinema, if you're a cinephile or you just want something to do in the suburban sprawl that is Los Angeles, yeah, check that out. I saw it there twice, and it's for me. This is like a smorgasbord movie, and what I mean by that is it's kind of like there's something for everybody in this film. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I really think that you can watch it, not necessarily take it seriously. It was cool to see Tarantino go back to doing something in LA, doing something a little more grounded. It's not a Western, even though it does have some Western elements, because you and I know he was on the Western kick for a long time.
He spent a lot of time on the Western set. I mean, when you think about it,
yeah,
he sat on a lot of those scenes for a while.
Oh, yeah. Even going back to Kill Bill Volume 1, that was the first time he was starting to get into that Western kind of territory, even a little bit in Volume 1. And he's kind of stayed there to a degree, and it was kind of good to see him get away from that, even though he still kind of, pays homage to, Western TV shows in this one. I think if you're a fan of cinema and you're a fan of old Hollywood, you're gonna love this movie. I think this is the first picture that Tarantino's done, at least for me anyway, that our parents, and our parents' generation, people who grew up in the 60s, might appreciate and like even more than we do. I could be wrong about that, but so far, people of that generation have been like, they love it. Like they say they love it. Whereas
I think they grew up with the Sharon Tate murders, and they realized, they remember how big of a deal it was, and they were able to see, Tarantino kind of explore kind of a fairy tale ending with that.
Yeah.
Inglourious Bastards had a fairy tale ending.
Sure.
Django had a fairy tale ending, and even this one now.
Right.
It's kind of like. I think Tarantino likes to rewrite history, and he kind of likes to take scenes or take plots or historical events and kind of likes to see them unfold in a different way. You've never seen it unfold this way. So I think a lot of people that grew up at that time, I think they believe that Tarantino did the situation justice with the Manson murders.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think for like our mom, for example, it's like a lot more personal because they were kids when that happened, and it was this horrific, thing that they heard about. And it's very personal for Quentin Tarantino because, he calling it Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and having Sharon Tate, spoiler alert, yes, he changes history, and she die. She doesn't die. And she doesn't even. She's not even involved with the killers. And I think that this is a film, and I think I said this on our when we did our top 10 of the decade. This is a film that you should really do a little bit of research about the Manson murders before you go in, so that you can appreciate the ending a lot more. I think you'll really appreciate what happens, because I know the first time I saw it, I was like, wait a second, what's going to happen now? And, you know, but the second time I saw it, I was like, oh, okay. So he's changing history. And that's why it's called Once Upon a Time, because it has, like you said, it has that fairy tale ending.
Yeah.
And so it is very personal for him. But it is beautifully shot. The soundtrack
Yeah, I mean,
is
the atmosphere, the scenery, you know, it's unlike the Hateful Eight. It has a very, you know, summertime. I don't know what exactly the right word I'm looking for. The phrase
summertime.
It's like a summertime type of vibe to it, which I love. And the Hateful Eight was the total opposite. It had that dark winter type
February.
of vibe. Yeah, right. Yeah, January.
I can't wait. In the dead of February, I think I'll have a Hateful Eight marathon. I'm going to watch it like 5 times in a row. No, I like Hateful Eight's really grown on me, but can I just talk? I'm going to talk a little bit about what I really like, what I love the most.
Yeah, tell me what you loved.
Dude,
but it didn't make your top 10 of the decade.
It's not in my top 10.
It's you would probably rank it last out of the 3.
And I'd say,
but explain why explain what you liked and didn't like.
Well, okay. Well, here's the thing. So I love the characters, the DiCaprio and Brad Pitt characters. That casting is amazing. Those are 2 of my favorite characters that he's ever written. I love those 2 characters. They're right next to people like Max Cherry, played by Robert Forster, and Jackie Brown, and Ordell, and Jules Winsfield. Like, they're right up there with those characters, or right beneath them. I love those freaking characters. But and this is a criticism of Tarantino's kind of twilight work, his later work here, as he's because he's become. Some people think he's very arrogant in his filmmaking, the way he uses his paintbrush. I think, and I still love his films, but what's been happening for me is that there's a disjointedness about his filmmaking, even going back to Inglourious Bastards, where it feels like there's a lack of flow from some of his story ideas, and that's why I call this a smorgasbord movie. Take it or leave it. You know, there's something on the table that you'll want to pick at and eat and grab. You know, but not all the food on that table necessarily goes together. So taking these two.
Well, let me follow up on that, because I know exactly what you're talking about, and I was just watching the movie, and like there's he keeps on going back and forth from the Sharon Tate going to see the movie to DiCaprio kind of like struggling as an actor, and then you see Brad Pitt kind of riding in the car, and eventually he picks up the hitchhiker. Yeah, all that stuff he goes back and forth with all 3 of those stories at the same time. If you notice, so I get what you're saying. It's you have 3 things kind of going on at once.
Exactly, and I'm not so sure that if you put this in the hands of any other director, I think it would be horrible. But because it's in his hands, he's able to make it work. However, if I'm being a critic and I'm really looking at what I'm going to the film for, I really do feel like as a viewer, I'm kind of expected to go on this ride, and then this ride, and then this ride, and those 3 rides don't necessarily belong together for me. The biggest disjointed part of this, I'm going to go back to the Hateful Eight, because he's been doing this a lot lately, whereas in his 3rd act, what he seems to like to do, like right before he gets toward like the last 50 minutes of his movie, he's throwing in this narration to jump us from the first 2 or 3 acts to the final act. Yeah. He did it in Hateful Eight when he described who poisoned the coffee, and I thought it was the sloppiest narration that I ever heard on film. Now, since then, it's kind of like I've just kind of accepted it because I put my Tarantino rose-colored glasses on, but it still bothers me.
Well, I think
and he does something very similar in this one, and it bothered me the first time I saw it, and it still kind of bothers me.
With Kurt Russell doing the narration? Yeah, but that worked better with Kurt Russell.
It's better that it's Kurt Russell.
Yeah, because it's Tarantino in Hateful Eight. and everyone knows who Tarantino. I mean, if Tarantino did that his very first movie, you might have got away with it. But you kind of saying to yourself, oh, that's just Tarantino kind of doing a Vosot of the setup there. It's like it's kind of like, what? Why'd you have to do that?
It's a good Vosot. It's a Vosot.
Couldn't you bring in somebody else? But yeah, I get what you're saying about
this
that.
time around. It definitely flows a little bit better, but it still just feels sloppy to me. It felt lazy. Okay, you know, at the risk of, remember, I'm a Tarantino fan, but him throwing that narration in there just so we could jump from this first part of the movie that's all about this struggling actor who's you've got to go to Italy, and I love that character, to okay, let us get to the Manson murders, or the swerve of the Manson murders.
Right.
The way he bridges that just felt lazy and a little sloppy to me. That's all I'm going to say. Just using narration, I've always been a big critic of that, because he just kind of, this is the second time around where he's kind of used it in a way where I just felt like, that doesn't work. He also did it with Samuel L. Jackson in Inglourious Bastards to describe Hugo Stiglitz, and he also did it to describe the film Prince. Now, the reason why it doesn't bother me as much in those films is because it's just like an aside. It's just like, oh, film Prince, this shit will catch fire. Hugo Stiglitz, this is a badass motherfucker who wants to take down the Nazis. But it doesn't really take you out of the film for too long. It's still a little like, okay, that's Samuel L. Jackson's voice. All right, I'll go with it. It's a Tarantino movie. But these past two movies, that's the disjointedness for
All right,
me.
so you didn't like Kurt Russell's narration leading up to the Manson situation.
It's not so much that it's the narration. It's just the choice as a screenwriter to just jump from those first three acts to the final act.
Well,
I just feel like you could, with your writing, should kind of meld the story so that it flows.
I think this ties in, though, what I'm about to say. This is Tarantino's most tame movie, maybe ever, in quite some time. Hateful Eight. I don't think Hateful Eight made a lot of money compared to some of the other movies he made, like Kill Bill, Django Unchained, Inglourious Basterds. I think they all made a lot of money. So I think with this movie here, you saw how depressed he was when Death Proof. I don't think Death Proof did very well.
It was a flop. It was the only flop that he had. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember that bothered him.
Sure.
So you would think that Hateful Eight not making as much money as some of the other movies probably bothered him.
Sure.
So I think. This is the first movie too without the Weinstein brothers being involved. So I think you had major distribution here. You had top level Hollywood actors. Think about it. Tarantino always went against the grain.
Top of the top.
Yeah, top of the top. Yeah, I mean Tarantino always went against the grain, especially with Hateful Eight. He just cast whoever he wanted to cast, no matter what their age was. This one, it kind of felt like he, and I think Brad Pitt was great. I think DiCaprio was great, and Margot Robbie. Let's face it, she's been like the it girl over the last five years.
She's been great.
So yeah, you kind of felt like maybe the handcuffs were kind of on him a little bit. I don't think he had the freedom to make a movie that was 4 hours long.
No, and I didn't want him to make a movie that was 4 hours long. And you're definitely right. When I heard that he was casting Pitt and DiCaprio, I went, "Oh, okay, he's going for gold because because Hateful Eight, it made money, but I don't know if they were able to make as much of a profit as they wanted to because they.
I don't think Hateful Eight was as big of a hit with casual fans.
No, it definitely wasn't. It certainly
from
wasn't.
an underground standpoint, a lot of people look at that like it's his crowning achievement, but on a very low scale.
Yeah, as far as cinematography wise, it's the best film he's ever done.
Right,
Hateful Eight. But I mean, it's amazing. I mean, arguably, we're talking about art here, but in my opinion, that's the best film he's done as far as the way it looks. But the story wise, I do feel that there's a disjointedness to some of his later films that, as much as I love the story and the characters and the colors and the music. I just feel that there's a disjointedness to some of his writing, and I think in this one, what doesn't work for me is, as you highlighted, some of the elements in the movie just don't necessarily go together.
Right.
It feels great. It's a feel good movie, but that's just my critique. Is I wish he would have found a way, just like in Hateful Eight, to tie the first 75% of the movie to the last 20-25%.
Okay. All right. There's a lot we can still touch on here. The one of the things I wanted to get your take on was, I thought the best scene in the movie was when Brad Pitt goes to the Manson, what do you call it, Manson Ranch or Manson family, where
sure.
His former film buddy George is staying. And that whole scene, I thought it had great tension, great anticipation. You had all these people that didn't want him there, that felt like they were hiding something from him, and they kind of built it up. Like when you see George, like he's going to be, a slave like the Gimp was, or I don't know. Maybe he would have been dead, but when you see him, he's just kind of taking a nap. But was that a little bit anticlimactic?
Yes, it almost felt. I don't know, man. It almost feels anticlimactic on purpose.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that as an excuse.
They built up to it like it was going to be the most fucked up thing you would have ever seen.
So back to my criticism. That whole thing at Spawn Ranch, the ride there with the girl, she's 25, by the way. She's beautiful. She's not 17. She's 25.
All those girls,
okay.
All those girls though are kind of weird.
I know. Well, of course they're supposed to be weird. They're the Manson girls. They're the Manson kids.
Outcasts.
She. But what I'm trying to say is that part when they get to Spawn Ranch is really eerie, and the setup is really cool, and it's really great, and it's a little scary. For the first time, it feels like we're about to get into a horror movie.
Yeah. Don't forget about the rats you see on the floor and all the seediness. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's creepy. I don't know how I feel about that. I think that you get that payoff. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. The character pays off. Brad Pitt looks like $1 million before and after. When he punches the kid and he makes him change his tire, it's badass.
No, yeah.
The character.
Let me say this about Brad Pitt. This is the most likable I think Brad Pitt ever was.
Yeah, totally.
Like even if you watch Seven, you don't necessarily love Brad Pitt's character. The Kevin Spacey in real life is jealous of Brad Pitt in that movie. But in this movie right here, you see a whole different side to Brad Pitt. And to me, this is Brad Pitt's movie.
This is
like I feel to me, just from my personal taste, I felt like he stole the show because I could kind of see what that director. We touched on in the other video what that director was saying about DiCaprio, and I do think like the global warming thing. I think maybe his heart really isn't in acting as much as it used to be. I could kind of see that, but to me, this is. I think Brad Pitt put himself like number 3 on the Tarantino actors list, like Samuel L. Jackson, Christoph Waltz. I would say Brad Pitt is in contention.
He's up there now
for one of the the Tarantino go-to actors.
Oh yeah, he's definitely up there now. And he's played 2 characters, Aldo the Apache and Glorious Bastards, and then this a character of Cliff Booth. And these characters, they don't really change from the beginning of the movies that they're in to the end. They don't. Neither of them really change, in my opinion. But what's so great, having him fight Bruce Lee, spoiler alert again, and hold his own, and against Bruce Lee
and the Mansons, and the Manson family.
That was beautiful because it made it realistic that if he were to cross paths with those animals, that he could hold his own, and he does, and that's an awesome sequence. That's
a good point. They kind of built up to that, like
absolutely.
Like if he can handle Bruce Lee, he can handle anybody.
And he's courageous and he's brave. He also has this code. He's this guy who's on the outskirts of the business of the industry that
he's not a big star. That's what you like about him.
Not at all, right? No, he's this kind of working class guy, kind of living in the outskirts of Hollywood, but he's a badass. And that sequence at Spawn Ranch is great, but it really feels like the air just gets let out of the balloon when it's Bruce Dern. That was supposed to be, from what I understand, that was supposed to be Burt Reynolds You know,
Yeah,
in the
he would have, either one would have
now.
worked.
Now, if it was Burt Reynolds, maybe we'd be talking about it like it was a little bit differently because people haven't seen Burt Reynolds in a long time, and so that casting choice, it would have been like, oh, Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
But still, if it's just the character, we're kind of sitting here going, okay, Bruce Dern, you know, like what's the
Yeah, but
big
you
deal?
still you still walk away from that scene, kind of saying to yourself, all right, this is Charles Manson's family or whatever, all of his followers. What they're doing is they're taking advantage of some old guy and just kind of, you know, they're kind of just living off of him.
Right. He doesn't mind.
Right.
Apparently he's okay with it. And Cliff Booth is like, well, all right then. If you're okay with this, then that's fine. But it
Not exactly kidnapping.
if we're talking about, you know, if we're just talking about that sequence, about how you feel at the end of it, I don't know. Like, am I satisfied as a viewer by the end of that sequence? I'm not sure that I am. I'm
Okay.
not sure. I do feel what you're saying is that he built something up and then it didn't really go anywhere. What it does is it kind of leaves us to the end because Tex comes out on his horse,
Right.
and then we know those two are going to meet again at some point in the movie, Tex and Cliff
Right.
Booth. But I feel like he's made a career to a degree, Tarantino, out of kind of leading you to these places and then saying to you, expecting you as the viewer, well, okay, I'm not just going to tell you where we're going. You're going to have to wait and see why we did this.
Right.
And I guess all I'm saying is that as a viewer, sometimes that works for me. And
I mean,
sometimes it
would you have preferred it though if there was a more of a direct line of revenge from Tex and some of the Manson followers? Because when they show up at DiCaprio's house with the muffler smoking and everything, they're not there for Brad Pitt. They're not there to get their revenge.
They're there to kill whoever's in Terry's house. It doesn't
Right.
matter who was in it. They're there to kill who's ever in there, and it really was in 1969, Sharon Tate and the other people that were in that place, you know. But they run into probably the greatest moment of the movie when DiCaprio comes out with his frozen margarita mix and tells the damn hippies to get off his private driveway.
Yeah, I'll tell you, DiCaprio, even though Brad Pitt won the Golden Globe and you know he's going to get a lot of the accolades, I'll tell you, DiCaprio did have his moments in this movie from a comedic standpoint and from from a drama standpoint too.
Yeah,
The scene with the girl was great. You know, the ad-libbing was great.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I don't want to shortchange DiCaprio because I still thought he definitely had his moments.
No, I think, see, that's the thing. We get the criticism from the guy that you know, the indie director. You know, I just don't agree. I
don't know him.
I love the way DiCaprio was able to all at once, and maybe it's because of my own personal feelings about the character, is that he was able to come on, sort of express this insecurity and have it be really kind of sad, but also really funny at the same time. When the girl tells him, that's the best acting I've ever seen, and he goes, thank you. And then he like starts to cry. Like he literally starts to cry. It's oh my God. Like I start, like it's a combination of like, I want to laugh my ass off, but at the same time, I want to cry too. Because I'm happy for him. Like I'm happy for him on one hand, but I'm also like just dying laughing at just the level of insecurity that he's had throughout the entire film. Up to that moment.
And you could also argue that the scene with him in the trailer, you know, with the alcohol, throwing the alcohol, sipping it, throwing it out of the trailer, you could argue that that's some of the best acting DiCaprio's ever done.
Right.
The scene in the trailer.
Totally. And it's basically...
When he kept fucking up the lines.
Well, it's basically a montage of his ranting because there's a lot of chopping. There's a lot of editing that goes on. But it's like, it works.
Yeah.
It works. It's actually really well... Like, it's, you know, some would say that's sloppy editing. Actually, it works so well for the comedy beats of that scene when he's basically just, you know, chastising himself in the trailer and then crying and drinking. And that's a good scene. Yeah.
All right. So the final thing is, I was trying to see if Tarantino was going for like trying to send a message between, you know, Manson getting rejected by the by the music industry, you know, Sharon Tate, you know, just her personality, in terms of how she treated people and just all the montages they showed of her. Brad Pitt as the stuntman, the DiCaprio as the great actor, kind of declining into the struggling actor, trying to going through sort of a midlife crisis from an actor's standpoint. Is there something that he was going for? Is something as like it ties into that time? Was he trying to send a message?
Oh, you mean for
everybody, just in general, from those four characters? I know they didn't show Manson in the movie that much. There's a deleted scene, which is really good. But was there any type of message that Tarantino was trying to send in terms of them kind of struggling in Hollywood?
Yeah. Oh, well, at the time, there were a lot, and this happened. Obviously, for the DiCaprio, that's why the DiCaprio character is so important, is because those movie actors became TV actors, and then TV actors would have less respect, and then they would just be, shuttled to the bottom of the list, in terms of being a leading man, and then they wouldn't really have a bankable career anymore where they could afford their house in the Hollywood Hills and, be able to continue being a Hollywood actor, because like any other job in the world, you have to keep it in order to be able to, it's like being a boxer, you have to keep boxing, and unless you got a really good accountant or something like that and you've done a great job saving your money, but you have to keep going. And so I think that Tarantino can relate to that. But I think for present day, going to 2019 and to 2020, the film industry is struggling. Fewer and fewer people are going out to the movies. And I think that it is kind of reminiscent of like, wow, this was a time where, people were going out to the movies. It was right before the new Hollywood era when Scorsese, Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, those guys kind of came in. George Lucas, sure, came in. It was about 3-4 years before those guys made their splash in 1969. But it was the old Hollywood when movies still had happy endings, before the 70s where, endings became grim and dark. So there is this, I do think that it is kind of saying like, once upon a time, in Hollywood, people made movies and actors were respected and people got into movies and it was a big thing and it was something that you got really excited about, because Tarantino's been on that for years now. And so I do think that is reminiscent of what's going on in the film business where people aren't getting excited to go out to the movies. People aren't, not as much anyway.
And now that I think about it, I think maybe this whole movie was inspired by kind of this new generation, new age with the technology. I know Tarantino hates Netflix. He hates the way that people are so quickly kind of moving on away from video store rentals and movie theaters. Yeah. So maybe that was part of the motivation behind this movie too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can see some of that. I can definitely see some of that because he loves Hollywood. He loves film. He loves film history. And so, and I think, and I'm not saying this as a criticism, but I'm sure some people will, is this, this might be one of his more self-indulgent, films because of the way, I mean, he's got, he even has, before his movies, he has that da 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 the previews.
Didn't Kill Bill have that?
Before the movie, but he actually puts this in the movie. He's got a drive-in movie theater showing the trailer for CC Rider. It's about people in the film industry. I mean, so it probably is the most Tarantino taking the camera and turning it toward his world.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this because my dad loves the 70s. Obviously, guys like Sal, the people that grew up in the late 60s into the 70s, they can't get out of that era. Like, they friggin' love that time. 70s music, 70s TV shows. Even Sal goes to me, Rob, you don't understand, in 1969. So my point is that they love that time. And that's something I just want to illustrate. They look back at that time like there's no other era that they would have accepted being born in. That's how much they love it. And I think Tarantino's is the same exact way. You know, he's always been in love with the 70s for years.
Yeah, well, there was something very special about that time. I'm tempted to say something like we feel that way about the early 90s because we get our nostalgia goggles on.
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, there's certain things about the 90s that obviously I love. But I could be unbiased too and say that, you know, wrestling kind of sucked at certain points in the 90s too. So
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think, look, I mean, every era has good and bad about it, but I think in pop culture at that time, not just in pop culture, but in politics and in the social world, there were a lot of things that were standing on its head. There were a lot of things that were changing. And, you know, it's that whole 1960s decade, everybody who talks about it, we talk about it like, you know, it was kind of like the Pyrocent, to my friend Matt Rodriguez, you know, that's the name of his band, but the Pirates, which is basically about a fire starting, you know, rubbing two sticks together in order to make a spark and have a fire. There was a lot of that going on in the 60s with politics, the social world, and in pop culture. I do think that in the 90s we had this alternative movement in music and in movies with independent cinema.
Oh, definitely.
And I think in the 60s there was so much of that, you know, and, you know, it led to, you know, a lot of things that happened in the 1970s as well. And so it is an era, I think, from the early 60s to like the late 70s that we constantly look back on because there was a lot of truth, there's a lot of reality, there was a lot of brutality, there was a lot of things that were wrong that people had to kind of survive through. And there was a lot of good art, there was a lot of good music and a lot of really good movies. And so
yeah, I mean the show, I mean that time frame was so revolutionary that they made a whole show about it called The Wonder Years. So
yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's you know, it started a lot. We don't seem to, obviously 1917 is coming out in theaters. That's about World War I. A lot of movies have been made about World War II, but none of us are sitting around like, hey, put on that record from World War II era, you know, because we don't seem to do that. That's kind of like Robert Downey Jr. said on Off Camera with Sam Jones a while ago now. He said World War II era is kind of like our ancient history. We talk about it like almost like it happened on a different planet. That's how a lot of people talk about it, you know. Unless you're our grandfather, you know, who actually his generation who actually was there and experienced it. But you and I, it's so long ago and so far from our reality.
It might as well be the late 1800s.
Yeah, exactly right. It might as well be the late 1800s. It's like ancient. It feels like it's ancient history. Even that's not ancient history. Right. But it's so long ago.
And you know what it is too? The music and, you know, any type of film from that time, obviously it just hasn't, it's not as accessible as some of the stuff from the 60s and 70s. I guess that might be the main reason.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. But so I think some things are better, you know, and I think some things are worse. And as far as the Netflix thing goes, you know, Noah Baumbach just said something really cool. You should check out the Directors Roundtable. For I think it's called THR. They do a roundtable for like Oscar nominees every year on YouTube. It's awesome. And Noah Baumbach, who directed Marriage Story, that movie was only released on Netflix. You know, only on Netflix. And he made an argument for it. He said, hey, look, that doesn't change the way I shoot my movie. It doesn't change the way I write my movie. It doesn't change the way the actors act for the movie. We shoot it the same way we would as if it was going to be up on a big screen. So I think the mentality moving forward is that people, directors and artists are going to have to embrace, you know, the Netflix medium because they are the big boy in town now. And, you know, we're going to see more and more limited release or exclusive release to Netflix. And we'd be silly not to check it out because, you know, there's some good films are going to go right into that direction because Marvel and DC and these big time franchise movies are good. They don't need to, they can release the movie and they'll make $400 million easy, you know, but, you know, a movie about two people who get divorced or a movie about, you know, a bunch of, you know, mobsters, even if you cast the best actors in the world, may not make enough money anymore, may not be profitable enough. So people are going to have to change with the times if we want good cinema to survive. You know, take independent cinema, take it to the art house theaters and independent theaters, you know, and hopefully we'll have more art house theaters, you know, and then take stuff like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Irishman, do a limited release, showcase it, you know, and then put it on streaming services and make sure that people can watch the movie, because we, you know, make it so that we can watch the movie. We need to be able to watch the movie.
Right. No, that's a good point about Netflix. But yeah, just to wrap it up now. I mean, for my personal taste, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I thought it was cool. I'm not going to say it ranks on the upper echelon of Tarantino's filmography or the bottom half. I think it's kind of in the middle. I think it's great, but I don't think the movie's gonna like blow me away like Pulp Fiction or Jackie Brown. I don't think it has the replay value of those movies, but I still think it's a very solid second to last movie in the Tarantino pantheon, as Jericho calls it. But how is this going to rank for you? Just to quickly wrap it up.
I feel very similarly. It's about 7 in my list of 9 Tarantino films right now. If you're looking at all his films, 9 complete films before he gets to his 10th.
Yeah.
It's at about 7 right now. His movies grow on me, but I suspect that this movie is going to be one of those movies that I'll put on while I'm washing dishes. I'll be like, oh man, I love that part. Yeah. But it's not, like I said, because of some disjointedness, because of some writing choices that I'm not crazy about, I don't think it's one of his films that I'll be glued to from start to finish.
All right. Thanks for watching, and hope you enjoy the review.
Yeah. Thank you.